while the report by the FCIC explained in over 500 pages what caused the financial crisis, according to some people, you can't help but feel like something is missing. As in, what do we do to prevent another one? Judging by the partisan divisions within the commission itself, it doesn't seem like we're going to see an overwhelming consensus on how to truly reform the practices of our financial sector. And add to that, the fact that this commission is just a panel that wrote a report. It has no legislative authority. Even if there was a consensus, there would be nobody to carry out those actions. So does that mean that history will be doomed to repeat itself? Well, joining me from our studio in Los Angeles to discuss it is Richard Esco, consultant, writer, and senior fellow with the Campaign for America's Future. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. I want to talk about the timing of this report here. I mean, aside from the fact that this commission has no legislative authority, has it come a little bit too late? You know, the financial reform bill was already passed. Obama just gave his State of the Union address, and all the focus is on the future. Are people no longer wanting to point the blame at, what happened 2 years ago?
Well, I think that's a good question, but I would argue that there's some value to the timing being where it is right now, because a lot of experts feel that the amount of reform that was passed last year wasn't enough to protect us from future danger. And if we're not protected from future danger, we need more of this kind of information coming out so that we can document why additional reforms are needed to protect us, as you say, from having the future repeat itself.
But if nobody can agree on exactly what it was that caused the financial crisis, if we have Democrats releasing one report and the Republicans on the panel releasing their own report, then, I mean, is anything ever going to get done? Will future only repeat itself if no one can agree?
Well, I think there are a couple different questions in there. Will the future repeat itself if more isn't done? Almost certainly. I think that's a given. And even the major Wall Street leaders themselves are now claiming that we can expect this sort of thing every 5 to 7 years, as Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan Chase said. There's no need for it to happen again, but I think if we do see political gridlock, it will happen again. As far as there not being agreement and there being two separate reports and so on, that sort of thing was almost inevitable given the kind of money that's being given in political contributions right now. So this kind of political division was bound to happen, but what's surprising, if you look at the poll numbers in this country, the vast majority of American people, regardless of their political party or regardless of whether they consider themselves liberal or conservative, thinks more should be done to regulate Wall Street, and they're absolutely right.
Well, one of the things that I think a lot of Americans would agree with is that they feel like no one has been held accountable for what happened. And so supposedly, this commission, what they did is they did pass on a few names to the Department of Justice of people that they're recommending for prosecution. We don't necessarily know who that is yet, but what do you think the chances are that the DOJ is actually going to take it up, take somebody to court?
Well, they're actually allowed to pass these kinds of investigations on to both the National Attorney General and the state authorities. And we don't know yet what the mix is between the two of them. I would say at the national level, the record has not been at all good under previous administrations or, frankly, under this administration for pursuing the kind of Wall Street criminality that there's been significant evidence of. Some of the things seem overwhelming because there are very strict laws governing what officers of a corporation can say to its shareholders, and there's very well documented evidence of what appears to be very misleading information. And then we have other sorts of government settlements that don't hold people criminally accountable for what appears to be criminal behavior and just fines the corporation, which means the individuals involved don't even pay the penalty themselves. So I think what we're seeing is a lack of zeal at the national level about the kind of law enforcement we need. And remember, this isn't about revenge. This is about discouraging this kind of behavior in the future. And right now, we haven't done enough with prosecutions to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again, or isn't happening now.
And, coincidentally, all of the top bankers right now aren't even in Wall Street, in New York, perhaps reading this report. They're at Davos making new business deals. They're still on a roll. But I do want to know, I was just speaking with our financial correspondent who was describing that this report really placed the blame all over the board. It was on everyone. It was on Wall Street. It was on regulators. It was on the Federal Reserve. Do you think that that they tried to do too much and they didn't really pinpoint one specific issue?
No, I think actually the best way to go at this, and again, I haven't read all 400 pages, but I think the best way to go at this is by seeing it as a systemic problem that involved the wrong kind of ideology about the free market and deregulation that penetrated both political parties for a long time, and I think they did a good job of identifying that. I think in terms of Wall Street misbehavior, that's almost inevitable if there aren't proper laws and regulations and enforcement taking place, and we'll look at their level of detail about that. But I think you had a systemic problem where government and the financial sector got too close, and the philosophy got to be too much of a hands-off approach that caused a lot of problems. I think they're right to talk about that, and I think they're going to do something else very useful, which is they're going to make a lot of the data publicly available for researchers so that other people with a great interest in this can dive in and get into more specifics about what needs to be done.
Well, we'll see if it actually leads to any change, or if it actually helps us solve another crisis like this in the future, so that we're not in the same position that we're at now, or we're not like, for example, Japan, who just had their credit rating downgraded today. Well, Richard, I want to thank you very much for joining us on this one.
You bet. It's a pleasure, and we can only hope.
That's right. Thanks.